Okay, so this just it just came to me this weekend. This is Dr. Lumps's. This is from Dr. Lumpson, and the Bible is a library of books with stories about humankind's experience with God. And the reason I guess that I thought about this is uh, I saw some, well, comments here and there on Facebook or wherever, and talking about, oh, the Bible and the violence in the Old Testament, and I have some friends that just say, oh, the Old Testament, all it is just sex and violence, all this kind of stuff. Well, it does have all that in it, of course, but
Mm-hmm.
but when you but if you're reading it based on the spirit of the word and the spiritual journeys of people, then you can really I can really understand Dr. Lumps is saying this. It's about humankind's experience with God. And then remember, Dr. Lumps is also the guy that says there's a lesson. There is a lesson, and for people, for us, whatever. In every episode in the Bible, there is a lesson in it. And so if we think about, Abraham had his little spiritual journey, then Isaac, but now, but they had all their problems just like we do today. And
Mm-hmm.
Jacob, for heaven's sakes, with his 12 sons, he just has a plethora of problems with his kids. But isn't that what humankind does? Okay, and when Jacob, when Simon and Levi went and destroyed that city and killed all those people because of Dinah, well, Jacob knew Jacob knew God, so to speak. And you notice Jacob didn't do the violence that his children did. But anyway, I just wanted to bring that up because if you know the Bible and if you think of the Bible as the holy book and you read it literally in all phases, well, then there's not much, to me, there's not really a lot to hold on to except the stories in the Bible. So I just thought I would bring that out, and particularly now that we're going to do Joseph. So
Mm-hmm.
let's go to Joseph now. We're going to back up some because remember we're going to back up to his episode before we did Judah last week. So okay, so who is Joseph? Let's keep this in mind. All right, Jacob, or Israel. Joseph was the first son to Rachel. And remember, Jacob wanted Rachel for his wife, and Laban tricked him. And so he had to have Leah for his wife. And he did have sons by Leah and actually by Rachel's concubines. But he paid attention to and he favored Joseph, and Joseph was also kind of like Esau and Jacob. Esau just was not set to follow in the steps of God's ways and things like that, but Jacob was. And so in this situation, Joseph was the one who I'm sure Jacob taught and he was the one to have the ways of God passed down to him. So so Jacob was Israel's favorite son, okay, and the one son who would know the ways of God. The other thing that's really interesting, and that's what's going to make these stories really interesting, is Joseph was skilled in dream interpretation. And Dr. Lanza and Dr. Echo see that well, dream interpretation was a big thing back in Egypt and in places like that. But Dr. Lanza and Dr. Echo say it was passed down. In other words, Abraham taught Isaac, Isaac taught Jacob, and now Jacob taught Joseph. Now that's how they say that the dream interpretation came about. But Joseph was particularly good at it, as you will see. So that's who he was. And we're going to go back to just going to go back to chapter 37 so that we know where we're starting off with Jacob or Joseph. And Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told it to his brothers, and they hated him yet the more. And he said to them, listen to this dream. This is the first dream that Joseph has, which I have dreamed. Behold, we were binding sheaves in the field, and lo, my sheep arose and stood upright. And behold, your sheaves stood round about and bowed down to my sheaf. And his brothers said to him, are you indeed going to reign over us, or are you going to have dominion over us? And they hated him yet the more for his dreams, for his words. And of course, you'll see Joseph's dreams come true. And then he had the other dream, and he dreamed another dream and told it to his brothers and said, behold, I have dreamed another dream, and behold, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down to me. And when he told it to his father and to his brothers, his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream that you have dreamed? Shall I and your mother and your brothers indeed come to bow down ourselves to the ground to you? And his brothers envied him, but his father observed the sayings. Now, we're going to see in a couple more chapters, this too comes true. And then, okay, and then it was Joseph's fate. His brothers, then some Midianite merchants passed by. His brothers sold him, put him in a pit, and the Midianite merchants passed by. They drew and lifted up Joseph out of the pit, sold Joseph to the Arabians for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought him into Egypt. So that's where we begin with. That's where we begin with Joseph, and it's chapter 39. All right. Now, I decided we're going to read the story because it reads just like a novel. So, and then we'll point out the things. And Albert's going to help me read scripture. But I'll go ahead and do this, and then we got lots more. And Joseph was brought down to Egypt, and Potiphar, that's the best I can pronounce it, an officer of Pharaoh, commander of the guard, an Egyptian, bought him from the Arabians who had brought him down there. And the Lord was with Joseph, and he became a prosperous man in the house of his master, the Egyptian. And his master saw that the Lord was with him, and that the Lord made all that he did to prosper under his hands. And Joseph found favor in his sight and served him. And he made him steward of his house and all that he had put in his charge. It came to pass from the time that he had made him steward of his house and over all that he had, that the Lord blessed the Egyptian's house for Joseph's sake, and the blessing of the Lord was upon all that he had, both in the house and in the field. And he left all that he had in Joseph's charge, and he did not know what he had except the food that he ate. And Joseph was a very handsome and pleasant to look at. Now, let's look at what, and it's going to keep saying, and the Lord was with Joseph. Okay. And the master saw that the Lord was with him. And I'm sorry. Oh, okay. So here's one of the differences. Okay. And I just use this word that it just comes to me instead of God's, but Joseph, okay. Remember Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, all we read where God spoke to them. Okay, we read that directly and whatnot. Now, we don't hear God speaking to Joseph like in the other scriptures, but God, and so I just, this word just came to me, and but Joseph was under the influence and the guidance of God. Okay, even though he didn't hear God speaking to Joseph as, I mean, it wasn't written or described that way. I'm sure that he was guided, but again, it's just a little different. He studied with his father. He was the one of the 12 that was just prone to do this. So that's one of the points, and that's when you see that's when you see in all of these. Okay, he was thrown into the pit by his brothers. Okay, and he was sold by his brothers. Now, would that not normally make somebody bitter and resentful? I mean, you know, okay, but no, he wasn't, and he went to the Egyptians. He was sold there, and essentially he was a servant, a slave, but he did it. He didn't resist. He did it. He did it well. He was blessed by God, and he prospered very well. And just another point there, when it said that he was not in charge of the food, and that had to do with the Egyptian food laws. Just like the Jews couldn't eat, the Hebrews couldn't eat with the Gentiles. Well, the Egyptians couldn't eat. They had their special rules too. They couldn't eat with the Hebrews. And of course, finally, that last sentence, and that's where we come up with this next story. Joseph was a good-looking guy. Okay, so now we're going to go to this next story. We're going to read it just like a novel. You know, it's crazy. Okay, would you like to read it, Albert?
Sure. And it came to pass after these things that his master's wife cast her eyes upon Joseph, and she said to him, "Lie with me." But he refused and said to his master's wife, "Behold, my master does not know what he has in the house, and he has put everything that he has in my charge. There is no one greater in this house than I, neither has he kept back anything from me except yourself, because you are his wife. How then can I do this great wickedness and sin against God?" And it came to pass, as she spoke to him daily, he did not listen to her, to lie with her, or to be with her. Excuse me. And it came to pass one day that Joseph went into the house to do his work, and none of the men of the household were there in the house. And she caught him by his garment and said to him, Lie with me. But he left the garment in her hands and fled and got out to the street.
Problems.
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead. At this time, it is the woman, I have to admit. All right. And it came to pass when she saw that he had left his garment in her hands and had fled out to the street, she called to the men of her household and said to them, See, he has brought in a Hebrew servant to us to disgrace us. He came in to me to lie with me, and I cried out with a loud voice. And when he heard that, I lifted up my voice and cried aloud. He left his garment in my hands and fled and got out to the street. And she laid up his garment by her until his master came home. And she spoke to him according to these words, saying, The Hebrew servant whom you brought to us came in to disgrace me. But as I lifted up my voice and cried aloud, he left his garment in my hands and fled and got out to the street. And what do you think the master did? The master did what his woman wanted. Just like when John the Baptist got beheaded. That's what she wanted, and that's what she got. So you want to do this, Albert?
Sure. And when the master heard the words of his wife, which he spoke to him, saying, After this manner did your servant to me, his wrath was kindled. And Joseph's master took him and put him into the prison, a place where the king's prisoners were confined, and he remained there in prison. But the Lord was with Joseph and showed him mercy and gave him favor in the sight of the keeper of the prison. And the keeper of the prison entrusted to Joseph's care all the prisoners who were in the prison, and he was in charge of whatever they did there. The keeper of the prison did not look to anything that was in Joseph's charge, because the Lord was with him, and whatever he did, the Lord made it to prosper.
Okay, so here we are again. Joseph, okay, now he's in prison. What? And it says, and the Lord showed him mercy, gave him favor. But it was this presence. He was just under the influence of God. Okay. He didn't resist. Okay. I mean, that's what anybody else would have said. Wait a minute. That's not true. She didn't, I didn't do that. So he didn't resist. He went to the prison. And I was gonna try and do some more of the dreams, like in 40 and 41, but there's some other things here where I'm just kind of go off on some things because Joseph, in my mind, again, we talk about the Old Testament, well, and we just, and even with Joseph, okay, you know that Joseph, whenever you hear Joseph, you think of that multicolored coat that wasn't multicolored coat at all, and nobody thinks about his character and what he did, but he was with God, and he, to my mind, let's go. I have a couple scripture references here. Okay, it brought to mind. Okay, when Jesus, Jesus taught the kingdom of heaven on earth. All right, and when he was trying to teach people, one of the Beatitudes that you see here is, blessed are you when men reproach you and persecute you and speak against you every kind of evil falsely. And most people come back with this and say, well, that's ridiculous. And yeah, that's, it's not possible. And that's the kind of retort that Dr. Erica would get many times when he's doing the teachings of Jesus with meekness and compassion, when they're just like, it's just not possible. That's what people say. But when I think about this, and I think about Joseph, I mean, here's our model for demonstrating this, from the Bible and individual. I mean, because here he is now again, in prison, and so he's okay. I'm in prison, and he agrees, and he doesn't resist. And then the other scripture that comes to mind was Matthew 5:41. Whoever compels you to carry a burden for a mile, go with him too. Well, we will see already, okay, Joseph did prosper, and okay, now he's in prison. But what we're going to see in the future is that Joseph prospers a whole lot more, okay? And because he stays with that guidance with God. And that is what Jesus talked about when he talked about the kingdom. And I'll go over this again. I know some of you know this time and time again, but the word for kingdom in Aramaic is malkutha, okay? But that word has many meanings, but the one meaning that stands out is counsel, the counsel or the guidance of God. So when Jesus said, the kingdom is near, or the kingdom is among you, what he's saying is God's counsel, okay, the kingdom, the counsel of God, it's here now. You don't have to wait to go to heaven. God is here, right here and now. And I just, when I was doing it with Joseph, and it is just so evident. And no matter, no matter, no matter whether you were a slave like Joseph, or whether you were in prison, or if you're or if you're wealthy, as Joseph goes on to be, it's just, to me, it's a great lesson, and it does relate. The Old Testament is very related to the New Testament. Jesus taught out of the Torah, the Old Testament, and you can find these relationships. Now, this one, this one I don't think is in print, but it just came to me. Like I say, Joseph, he learned. I am sure he was groomed by his father Israel, or Jacob, but that is the way it works. And then, but the other mistake that we make is that we think that, oh, well, that can have that. Well, that's Joseph. Yeah, I mean, that happened to Joseph. I mean, look, he was a great guy in the Bible. Or or even when it comes to Jesus, well, Jesus, did this, and Jesus did all this healing. Well, that has nothing to do with me. Well, yeah, it does, because it's not just it's not just all these figures in the Bible. Or we do it with preachers too, don't we? I mean, some of these preachers of these mega churches and everything. I mean, we just think they're, you know, and it's like, well, you know, they got the connection. I mean, we don't. However, um, I just was doing a lot of thinking this week. But I'll tell you what. Let's read this. This God was with Joseph. I had a Torah commentary, and this was a midrash. That's what their little stories are, and I just thought this was so good. And then I have a quote from Dr. Lomsa. Human friends can always be found when a man is successful, but in time of trouble, they tend to forsake him. Not so God. He was with Joseph when he was a slave, when he was in prison, and also when he was governor, which we'll see in the future. So, and I guess it's just another quote that I found from Dr. Lomsa, and I'm always trying to say this in one way or another, but I just thought this was stated so well. God is the eternal spirit who can be reached at all times, everywhere, and by everyone. God is not a bloodthirsty tyrant. God is a loving parent. So we will have a lot more on Joseph. We're going to look at some of his dreams, but then okay, the other thing I didn't say about Joseph to remember is that Jacob, or Israel as we call him, still believes that Joseph is dead. Remember the brothers took back took the coat back with some blood stains on it and told their father that he was dead. So the next story is how this all shakes out, and well, Jacob does get to see his son again. So, but these are great stories. So does anybody have any comments? Let me just flip here. Okay, I think that was, yeah. Okay. Well, we do accept contributions. We are now a 501c3. And again, we all of the commentaries, Dr. Lomsa, Dr. Bracco, we have them in our store. They're also on Amazon.